everyone. Thanks for joining and giving your valuable time. So we are starting with the session. So we are live with our today's webinar on different equity option plans, how to choose from different options like ESOP, SAR, Phantom, RSUs. So let's welcome our co-host, welcoming Dheeraj, Ritika and Manish as our co-hosts. So Mr. Dheeraj is the CEO of RT Capital with more than 24/7 years of experience in renowned organizations like Tata Mutual Funds, Morgan Stanley, ICICI Capital. He has proven results in financial service industry, delivering an increase in revenue for various companies with brilliant strategies. Ms. Ritika is a strategic consultant at RT Capital with more than 10 years of experience in financial industry. She played a key role in identifying areas for business growth and expansion strategies. Mr. Manish is currently a business head at Vega HR with more than 8 years of experience in managing ESOPs for big unicorns like Blue Dart, Delivery, and Farai. He specialized in stock option plans. So we are honored to have you all today and looking forward to have an insightful session with you. Over to you, Manish.
Thank you so much, Sania, for the wonderful introduction and arranging such a great webinar where more than I can see there are a lot of participants are joining and more will join during the session as well. So as we all know about the topic and the agenda on which we are going to have this discussion for the next half an hour or 1 hour today, right? Many of us are aware of many of the equity compensation plan. We are reading this, hearing about on LinkedIn or many other social media platforms or on business news. It's like this organization has successfully launched their equity compensation plan or ESOPs, and the organization which was a startup 2 or 3 years back, now they have listed with making multi-millionaire wealth that has been created for their employees and whatnot, right? So as a part of the series of our webinars, right, which we have started conducting from this year, this is our fifth webinar. For the last 3 or 4 years, many of you have joined on our initial webinars as well. Today there are many repetitive audience as well. That shows like the kind of a content and the kind of awareness we are trying to provide it in the ecosystem, so that more and more people become aware about and about the policies, about the structure, what to choose, what not to choose, what are the pros and cons of going with any of the plan. Today I am taking this opportunity to, like, we all know about the various equity compensation plans, right? What on top of your CTC, on top of what we are getting from our company, the organization launches as a long-term incentive plan for their employees or for their workforce in form of any of these methods, right? So now over the years, if you see about the Indian ecosystem, we have seen ESOPs as a greatest of the market share in the organization. But as we started growing as the startups and as organizations started growing, we are seeing some culture getting adopted here from the foreign countries as well. And now more and more kind of a different kind of a units, you can say it's ESOPs or SAR, which is stock appreciation right, or a phantom stock, or RSUs, which was more prevalent in United States earlier. That has been also being started rolling out in Indian companies, right, over the last 2.5 years, if we see in a particular, right? So today, the more and general discussion would be around these things, like how to choose one, maybe what are the key considerations and the factors before we are going ahead with it, like what the organization need to have in mind before even launching it, right? So there are two kind of a thing. Whenever some organization comes in, we generally ask them like, what is your purpose? So we will be discussing on all those parameters, all those key points or the bullet points in our upcoming sessions, and as the webinar will keep on going. Now I welcome Mr. Dheeraj and Ritika from Arit Capital, Arit Securities. Welcome Dheeraj sir, welcome Ritika.
Thanks, Manish. Thanks, Manish, for conducting this extremely informative webinar, is what we hope that this will turn out to be at the end of the session.
Thank you so much, Manish, and thank you so much for such flowery introduction. Thank you so much for that.
Right.
And appreciate what you guys are doing, and it's very happy to be. We're extremely happy to be part of it. Thank you.
Same here, sir. Uh, as we have like most of the audiences are already joined in, we'll start with some of the key things as sir, as per your own experience. Like you come up with a wide experience in this field, right? Over the last 10, 15, 20 years, you are seeing a dry shift in the Indian industries and the companies as well, right? You when maybe in the early 2000s there was a different kind of a employee rewards, employee motivation kind of a practices which were followed. Then in early 2010s, when Flipkart was launched, when Indian startup system was getting built, now and over after 2020 to 24, where you must have seen a greatest shift, right? How employees are now more bothered about what we are getting from the organization. They do not talk much about CTC and the salaries. Now people are discussing more towards the other side, right? So this is a shift. If I'll just take your experience and your input on this, like how would you break this a cultural shift maybe, or the requirement from both the sides, from the organization as well as from the employee world? How would you
Yeah.
see this?
Right. Thanks, Manish, for that. You know, quick question on that. Yes, you're absolutely bang on. Till probably a decade ago, we've actually, the first time that we started hearing about ESOPs was, and it's been a Western culture, Western thing all this while, right? So around maybe probably a decade or so ago, when we started seeing the advent of ESOPs in the country, I think the experimentation here was largely with the standard stipulated ESOPs, where the company's stocks were offered to the employees. But I think what we've seen since then has been a great shift in the mindset, not just of the promoters or the or the stockholders who are running it, and and the employees themselves as well. The kind of acceptance that we've seen and the kind of mindset shift that we've seen it's been very very encouraging, especially for the entire employee compensation packages and plans have evolved over the period of time. It is not just what your total CTC is. It is also about keeping in mind the career growth within the organization, long-term incentive plans, deferred, all of those things have we've started seeing those in the overall packages of the employees. And we've seen that increasingly employers have become a lot more receptive to offering ESOPs in one form or the other to their employees. What this is one part of it, the mindset shift on the employers. That's one part. And again, on the employee side as well, it is all about your long-term wealth that we talk about from an employee's point of view. If I work, if I'm the one who is slogging and adding value to the shareholders' wealth, how much of that is coming to me? So that is something which is also being recognized in the Indian diaspora on the across sectors. We've started seeing that happening. Another thing that what we are seeing in the entire ESOP landscape is the different types of instruments in different types, the types of structuring on the ESOP side itself, which more and more companies, as we've been talking to over the last 3 4 5 years, have started looking at it from a more pragmatic basis. When I say pragmatic basis, what I'm trying to say here is that companies have started realizing that it is not the case of one shoe fits all, right? Depending on which part of the corporate life cycle or the business life cycle I am at, whether I'm at a startup, whether I'm already established, or what my objectives are. Basically, at the end of the day, what the objectives of the management are. Whether it is to retain talent, whether it is to attract talent, whether it is to reward performance. So we've seen from a standalone, a plain vanilla ESOP offerings to the employee, we've seen a combination of it developing, which I think is extremely heartening to note. And kudos to all the business leaders that we are seeing. So it's not just about our integration with the global
Right.
economy, but also about the more and more recognition of rewarding your employees who are adding that value to the shareholders' wealth. So
Right. So adding here, Ritika, just like just another thing to know, right? You are working with organizations of different sizes, like some are listed entities who are in the industry from last 50 or 60 years, if I name some of the biggest of the brands you are working with. Then you come to certain early stage startups or the startups who have just launched, but their founders or the promoters have a vast experience. They were working in big corporates, they were working in big fours of the world, they were working in Fortune 500 companies of the world, Microsoft, Google, or Apple. Then they started something of their own in India or outside India as a SaaS, and now they come up with a mixed mentality or a mixed mindsets, right? With on the one side they want to hire the top talents from the competitors or from the reputed organization. On the other side they also want to maintain their cash flows or the restricted cash flows, and they want to incur the expenditure in a very smart manner or a way, right? So you see, like, they are offering CTC to match what they are currently getting, or maybe a certain hike on that. On top of it, if not the organization, nowadays employees have started asking it upfront. Okay, this is the CTC, or these are the perks, these are the benefits, but what about equity? What about ESOPs? And what is the value of your ESOPs, right? So having taking your experience in it, like from a mindset of a management or the board, how they are thinking it, how the board or the managements are deciding it, okay, where to go, what to choose, whether it is the right time to launch it, or maybe we can give certain additional or alternative solution to ESOPs to our employees. How would you say, evaluate this over your experience on this?
So, Manish, what you guys have spoken is really true. Okay, up until maybe a decade back, right, when we saw the initial phase of the startup boom, that's where a lot of startups started coming in. So, initially, what used to happen is the startups were always pro offering ESOP, because, see, for a startup, they want to hire the best talent, but they don't have the fund flow to kind of pay them these large packages. So, the easiest way out of that was that, okay, we'll give you a share of the company, let's all work together in building a company. That was the approach. But initially, if you look at it, maybe if you went to B schools and if you looked at the packages that were offered, every time a company came saying that we'll give you an ESOP, it people were kind of wary of taking up that offer, saying that, oh, we don't know whether this startup is going to last or not. Similarly, if you look at ESOPs on a listed front, right, there were some few of the larger corporates that were giving ESOPs, very few of them, and on the larger side, you had your tech companies like Wipro, Infi, all these guys who used to give ESOPs because it was more of a Western concept which kind of came to India. So at least in the IT company, that's where your ESOP initially used to be there. But once you saw the kind of wealth that was created, especially after the Flipkart scenario, where people realized, oh, this is a huge wealth making opportunity, the employees started accepting ESOP as a part of their compensation package way more. The acceptability increased so much that now you've reached a phase where employees upfront, like you said, employees upfront ask, what is the ESOP that you're going to offer to me? So that is a large shift that you're seeing in the employee side. On the management side, if you see, while startups have been pro ESOP, for a very, very long time, now if you look at listed companies, a lot of listed companies have either launched programs or they are in this phase of saying, okay, we've seen the usability and the practicality of offering ESOP to people. At the same time, it is going to help us whether we are at, we're just growing, or we are at a stage where we've grown so much that we need to motivate our employees to work towards the performance, better performance. So ESOP as a tool, it is so flexible and dynamic that you can achieve multiple objectives if you kind of design your ESOP well. So that is a huge acceptability change that we are seeing across board, whether it is a startup or a highly matured company.
Right. Just to add to what Ritika just mentioned, another thing which, and this I am taking cues from our very recent assignment that we've just concluded, is that the shift, another shift that has happened that we are seeing is that earlier we used to have a very restricted pool of employees which was being offered ESOPs. Today, it was probably only the CXOs level, or maybe just the top tier. Today, these employers are happily going maybe two, three rungs down the line, and not just that. That is now becoming the norm. The C-suite minus two. And apart from that, we're also seeing now there are selective employees also being offered or brought into this, where whom the organization want to reward and retain. So they may not be in a position to, those such employees may not be in a position to directly move the needle for the organization, but they indirectly they are part of the they're the ones who are moving the cogs, right? So they would want to retain them. So we're seeing significant broad basing of the ESOP pool that is being administered in these times.
Right. I would add certain thing here before we move into the more differentiation kind of a thing, like wherein the audience would also understand like what to choose, where to go ahead. Would like certain add-ons on basis the real life assignments or the examples which we are seeing shift. When we started 2.5 years back, 3 years back, there was always a market mindset like what you are doing or what you are doing. It's only 5 or 6% of the top cream employees for which organization are going ahead. I want to break this myth here. Right today, we have customers or like we have seen organization who have around 20,000 employees, but their ESOP or equity holders are 20 or 30 only. We have seen young startups or growing up startups who are unicorns now planning their IPO, who have 1,200, 1,300 employees in total. All 1,200 have ESOPs. Now we have one payment gateway company as a brand as our customer who started with, like, they have a manpower of 600 employees at that time. They started with 80 employees, like as you said, like top employees, CXO or the second line. But now at the third tranche or the fourth tranche, they have covered 100% of the audience or the workforce, which now counts to headcount around 850 employees. So there is a shift, though quantity doesn't matter, because now it's a matter of a privilege and a kind of a victory for an employee, right? Earlier, when out of 10,000 employees, only 10 or 20s are getting it. So no one in the organization were even talking about these equity benefits or the equity compensation. It was as confidential as some hidden PLIs or hidden incentive scheme, which no one need to discuss with anyone. It's in a closed room discussion. You come, management calls you in a closed room, they grant you a grant letter in a hard copy and say, okay, go back and sit quiet. It's confidential. Now organization, young founders, even the grown up organization making it as a practice, like this is a part of our culture, right? We want to make it as a culture, not CXO, not a, yes, quantification, volume, the value of the equity will definitely differ basis the role and the basis the impact and the criticality that person or the employee have in the organization. But you will see the shift from the organization or the management mindset, right? Even when you are going ahead and taking a ESOP pool approval in your board, like board is now also started asking like why 5% or 10%. Tomorrow you will, next year you will come back to increase the pool. So smartly plan it. So the audience like sitting here, like they are also, at some of them are the decision makers, some of them are the beneficiaries of these plans. So wherever we are mentioning ESOP in specific, do consider this as ESOP, phantom, RSU, SAR, the whatever name you give it, right? Ultimately it is my CTC and whatever extra I'm getting in form of equity or equity related compensation from my organization, right? Now I'll just break maybe some confusion is if is there. So let me clarify certain gaps or the certain differentiation. ESOP is a employer's stock option plan which organization launch, so wherein employees are given option on day one, and employees get certain criteria or condition like 4 year vesting or certain performance linked vesting. Once the options are vested, employees gets the right to exercise their right. By exercising, it means they can convert their option into equity share and they will become the shareholder of the company. Now company may give them the option to buy back or liquidate their ESOPs. On the other hand, SAR, which was more prevalent in US or UK earlier, now it's in India as well. It's a stock appreciation right. So what the company does, like you join me today, you are joining my organization today. I am already 100 CR valued organization as on date. So my valuation is 100 CR. So my per share price is say 5,000 rupees. Today you join me, we have a certain expectation and a certain organizational goals, right? Wherever you take us or wherever we will run together, right, from this valuation. After 4 years, if my valuation is say 500 CR, right? So you are getting the appreciation of it. Only 400 CR per share value equal to. So when I joined the company, the per share price was 5,000, and at the time of validity, or at the time of when the maturity timeline, the 5,000 price per share has increased to 15,000. So what value addition I have done? I have done a 10,000 rupees value addition. So I'll get either a cash settlement or a equity in lieu of that appreciation after 4 or 3 years basis my grant. Same happens at a phantom stock as well, wherein due to certain regulations, certain compliances, or certain structural challenges, like a company cannot issue ESOPs to any person who is not an employee, or maybe issue ESOPs only to an employee of a subsidiary company, and that to a 100% subsidiary company, right? So what if I have a Indian entity? I also have an entity in US, Hong Kong, Malaysia, and UK, but they are not connected as a parent subsidiary. Founders are same. So I will make 5 or 6 different ESOP policy? No. So what I'll do? I'll create a phantom policy there. Phantom means it works equally and as equivalent to the ESOP, but there are no compliances or regulation. You can treat that as equivalent to an internal sales incentive policy or an employee incentive policy, wherein everything, all the processes are laid down as equivalent to ESOPs. Like you will get 1,000 units of Phantom that has a 4 year vesting period, that has a certain performance conditions. But at the time of maturity, you will not get equity, or you will not have an option to convert those units into equity, but you will be settled in cash payment, or in the form of a bonus or incentives or a cash settlement you will get, right? And last, maybe you will not confuse, so that is why I've kept RSUs at the last. So RSU is a upfront equity given. So it's called restricted stock units, right? So wherein company offers you or promises you 1,000 RSUs on day one, and you have a 4 year vesting period of say 250 annually. So every year you are not getting anything vested. Every year you directly upfront you are getting units or equity of the company. 250 shares next year, 250 then year two, year three, and year four, and by the year end four you get 1,000 shares in your account or demat account, right? So there are different terminologies, different definitions, wherein we will be discussing it on more detail, on some of the common concepts and the myths, maybe what to choose, how to choose, right? But these are certain things wherein we call it equity compensation. Now it can be ESOP, it can be SAR, it can be Phantom, it can be RSUs, right? So basis many other factors what Dheeraj and Ritika has mentioned over the last 10 or 15 minutes, right? There are multiple factors, multiple key consideration which we need to evaluate or take as an organization before finalizing one, right? Now, Dheeraj sir, just to continue on this discussion from here on, right? Many often we come on a case like companies come to us for maybe advisory or maybe taking some consultancy on we plan to launch a ESOP because we have heard somewhere or we have read it somewhere, so we also want to launch. Plus, like many times they come say, okay, we are hiring some CXO level people and they have asked us ESOPs, right? So that is one. But there are, when you discuss in, when you understand their structure, their requirement, their objectives, you have different structures. Like, no, ESOP will not be a suitable for you, but you can go ahead with Phantom, right? So just want your feedbacks or your inputs on this, right? What are the kind of a common traits which you have seen over the last, say, I will say only 2.5 years, or maybe much prior to that? Like, basis these certain structure or be certain available parameters in any organization, we have suggested them or we guided them to go ahead with something other than the ESOP, right?
Right. So, thanks, Manish, for that quick intro to ESOPs. Right. So, like you just mentioned, there are ESOP when you look at employee stock option plan. So that's it's like a standard word now, right? But there are multiple within that. There are multiple types of ESOPs which can be which are offered to people at various organizations. It differs from organization to organization. So what we've seen, when we talk to any company, whoever it is, whenever they're looking to roll out an ESOP scheme for their employees, the most important thing is to sit down and understand why is the ESOP scheme being planned, and there are multiple whys that we try and answer, put some data against each of those whys, so that that helps us understand the reason for the ESOP, the objectives, and how to go about it. I think those two things are extremely important. One is why do they want to give an ESOP? So when we do this, whenever we do this exercise, it's been very rare that we've ended up doing exactly what the organization had in mind before our first meeting, at the time of first meeting. So typically these things evolve in terms of the structure of the ESOP evolves. There are many things which are probably much more standardized. When you look at whether it's a listed company or an unlisted company, things are a little more standardized in a listed entity than unlisted entity, because they come under SEBI's SBEB SC guidelines, which are fairly self-explanatory and very detailed in terms of these are the boundary walls that you will have to work with. But there's it also provides a lot of flexibility to the organization to design their ESOP scheme. So to get to narrate a recent example, where the organization had heard of the phantom equity, and it sounded very exciting, very different, very new. But when we sat down with them, we understood that the requirement, it was a startupish kind of a entity. So their requirement that time was largely to retain the existing talent that they had, and also to attract newer talent from within the same industry. Right, because you would want one is that if you let's say the example of a startup who wants to get funded at some point in time in the very near future. So they would want a marquee name to come on board from the industry. They would be cash strapped. They wouldn't want to give away too much of cash, but they anyways are looking to raise funds. They don't have enough funds to pay people for that marquee name, and you would want that marquee name to for investors to line up, for you. So those kind of adjustments, those kind of understandings have to be brought in. What is the level of dilution which you are okay looking at? If you already have an investor, how is that investor looking at in terms of diluting their stake which they would want to look at? If you're a listed entity, there's you would want to look at primary issuance of shares, or you want to look at the secondary market also. So then the structure changes, that entails a trust route, etc., how you administer it. So all those things are pretty fluid when we start the first discussions. So we've had cases where the management has come with a concept of phantom equity, but then we ended up doing a combination of RSU and ESOP. So the basic difference that you were mentioning about each of them is how the allocation of equity happens in that. See, ESOP is when the standard ESOP is where and there seems to be some echo coming in, right?
You continue. We'll check.
All right, sure. So that's where you will have again, the other considerations that would come in would be how much the exercise price should be, and if the exercise price, like in case of how much will the employee have to foot, for to as in when they exercise their options. In a standard plain vanilla ESOP, the exercise amount is expected to be much higher, among the others. RSU, where you are issuing it at face value, so there the number of options will also be less, but at the same time your the employee outgo will also be less. But then again, because the number of options are less over a period of time, the employee wealth is much lesser going forward. So, and again, the perquisite tax comes in. So not just the exercise price, the perquisite tax comes in. So those are various factors and things which have to be answered. And basis the answers to each of those is when the scheme gets designed. And of course, like I mentioned in the beginning itself, that the objective why you are launching the scheme is the bedrock of all further discussions that come in, right? And the objectives, like I said, could be different at different times before the same organization. So we've had we have multiple schemes within the same organization. which they have launched at various times, within their company's life cycle. You would, because like I said, the objectives could be very different. So initially your objectives would be to hire and retain talent. Then you would look at maybe rewarding employees for their performance. So at each stage your objectives become different, and you would want, so that's what we advise our investors also, that our clients also, that when you're designing it, it has to be flexible enough to take care of your next 3 4 5 years also, instead of just looking at today or the next 1 year. You would need to have that kind of an ammunition with you, because times are changing today, right? If you take any industry, it's extremely fluid and competitive. So you would want to be nimble footed, especially when it comes to your manpower needs and hiring needs. So that's where, and this comes in. This is an extremely powerful tool. ESOP is an extremely powerful tool if designed and implemented well.
Right, correct. On this, like we have completed our first 30 minutes, so I would like to share this with our all our audience. Like our Q&A session is will be taken on the last 15 or 20 minutes of the webinar. You can start posting if you have any queries, any doubt, anything you want to take a clarification on. You can start dropping those Q&As on our chat box, right? And we'll take one by one after next 5 or 10 minutes, when we'll be at the end of finishing out the webinar on the topics. We'll be picking all those queries to answer one by one. Just a disclaimer here, we may not complete taking all the questions because due to the time limits, but we promise all of you that whatever queries, whatever questions we have been dropped in this chat box, we'll be answering all of them, maybe post the webinar on a one-to-one email as well. All right, so be assured whatever your queries and doubts are, they all will get answered during the webinar, and if the time doesn't allow, we'll share all the answers and all the responses post the webinar as well. Right
Okay,
now.
Manish, I would just want to add one thing here. See, one is that, of course, this is more of a introductory, and just to give a feel of what ESOP is, what all does it entail, of course, because it is an extremely vast and detailed topic, right? I apologize if we've not been able to do justice to each of those options that we've just spoken about, because each of them have their own characteristics, and there's a lot more to go into detail. It will take multiple sessions, which I'm sure, as we go forward, if next few weeks, we will have those sessions also planned out, where we will pick up maybe one or two options, and discuss about them in detail as such.
I think, Dheeraj, just adding on to what you said, right? Manish, what Dheeraj was saying essentially was that once you identify your objectives, initially what we used to see is that people went in with just one simple plain vanilla, whether it was an ESOS or an SAR, whether equity settled or cash settled. Of late, what we've seen is that people want to go in for a mix. So you see a lot of these new schemes which are there, where people are like, companies are like, okay, let's do a 50% ESOS and 50% RSU. So essentially, it's like, uh, you're achieving multiple objectives through only one scheme, because in RSUs what typically happens is that you're looking at lower dilution, but and people are generally in the money. So what happens is, you want people to work towards a particular objective, so you tell them, okay, if you work towards that objective, the money is yours. So it is not, while you need to be working with the company for that much time, but it is not purely tenure linked. But if you look at an RSU, up until you achieve your targets, you will not be eligible to receive those options. Whereas if you look at ESOS, typically, while there is a performance parameter that people like to include now, but tenure is a more prominent, it's either a 50-50, mix of performance and tenure, or purely tenure. We've seen company do purely tenure based ESOS as well. So while ESOS is more tenure linked, if you look at RSU, it is more performance linked, where you're saying you achieve the objectives. We are giving you the confidence that if you do, because RSU is generally issued at face value. So we are giving you the confidence that you'll make the money, but you need to achieve the objective. So you define your objective, and you can do two different schemes, two different instruments in one scheme as well. That's the kind of trend we are seeing now.
Right. And to share it with the audiences, and to add on what we both have said, like to how to people all often ask like upfront, like give kind of in a very nutshell, like kind of give us a calculator wherein we'll put some inputs and we'll decide on our own. So I'll say it's not like we'll add 2 plus 2 and then it will become 4. Then there is a more of a qualitative and quantitative angles to look at it, right? Basis our current situation and the future expectation versus what will be our situation in future. Maybe today we are not cash strong. Maybe today we are not planning IPO. Maybe today we are not even thinking to hire someone whose CTC may be at 70, 80 lakh rupees, right? We have just started. So we think like, oh, 70, 80 lakh will be a very long run for us as a CTC. But what if tomorrow you get funded and your investor, it's a requirement of your investors or the board to hire a CXO at a CMO level, or at a CXO or at a CTO level, or you have to hire a CFO, or a bridge between the founders and the mid management, right? Then you have to go for those kind of hirings, and then organization starts evaluating these factors, and then they end up saying, okay, we have launched one policy by our, maybe where whenever we have started 3 years back we had a policy, but maybe we need to relook on this, and then ultimately they have to amend it or maybe launch a new policy itself. So ideally what should be a win-win for the organization, management and the employee, whenever we are deciding to go ahead with the equity compensation plan, very carefully we have to answer first of all to us ourselves only honestly, like what exactly is our purpose. Whether it is, there are startups want, like who has also built it on a FOMO basis. Like my all other startups or my all other friends have launched ESOPs in their organization, let me also launch it, versus like employees are asking, or versus like it's a need of the hour. But ultimately whether it's just the need of the hour and that's why I need to launch it, or whether I have certain things, maybe I have certain ROI from my equity compensation plan. If my organization grows from 1000 cr valuation to 10,000 cr valuation, ultimately these resources who are the human capital, right, they were the one who take it to one, from 1000 cr to 10,000 cr. Now they are getting only hikes and bonuses and PLIs. But if I link their compensation or their reward from this equity, so if I grow 10x, my employees will gain their value 10x. If I grow 100x, my employee will gain 100x through any of the measures. So to all the decision makers and all the policy designer from the organization point of view, though I'm not saying it is very complex or you cannot do on your own, but there are multiple factors after evaluating which we come, or you come on a conclusion, okay, as of now we go ahead with ESOPs, but we have to keep these clauses very open and flexible. Like I cannot restrict the vesting schedule will be 25% per annum for next 4 years, or I cannot say, or these are the employees whom I am identifying or making them eligible to get ESOPs upfront, right? So I have to make those things as well very flexible, so that even tomorrow something gets changed, some parameters or factor gets changed, right? They should not end up creating a new policy or amending the existing policy and do all those administrative tasks or pains and challenges again, right? That is one thing. On the other hand, as an employee or as a employer employee relationship, what we want to achieve, how we want to communicate, what kind of a transparency we will be bringing in, that will also somewhere impact your decision today, right? If it's a closed door discussion ki, okay, I have 500 employees, I'll invite those 10 employees in a closed room and offer the letter, so what, I can go ahead with anything. But this is not what happening in India right now, right? So again, to conclude on what I want to summarize here, whether it is ESOP or a phantom, basis your current cash structure or basis your future commitment or future plans of from your startup, right, of the next 3 or 4 year or 5 year, or whether you are even a listed entity, so what kind of employees you would like to cover in the next 1 year, 2 year or 3 years, and what you want to achieve, they all will collectively decide or uh, give you a conclusion, okay, let us go ahead with this. Now what are the process, what are the pros and cons of each and every kind of different kind of option that are available, that we will be sharing post the webinar as well to our audiences, right? These are the parameters, you can compare it. We deliberately do not want to share here or show a deck or a slide these are the four different kind of options, taxation, this is that, tick marks, and then perquisites, and then stock units, cash, that we will definitely share with you and this elaborate in more details. Purpose here was a three-way discussion, right, wherein we are putting our thoughts basis which the consumer or the people who are consuming this information, they can at least have some clarity on the roadmap, right? And even if they are going to discuss internally, even if they not today but after 6 months down the line, they need to plan it for their organization or their startup or their employees, they can have certain level of clarity, right? There is, sir, your closer comments.
Yeah, Manish, thanks for that. Just wanted to, you see, we, why is it so important? We all agree that it's an extremely powerful tool uh, to use it to serve multiple objectives, right? But it has to be thought through. It has to be smart enough. The plan that is designed has to be smart enough, has to be flexible enough to take care of not just today's needs but tomorrow's needs as well. And at the same time, because we've had examples which are at the two ends of the spectrum, where we've had one where it's a half, what happens if it's not really thought through scheme. So we've had examples within multiple industries where companies have had to come and call their ESOP schemes off after granting the options. So because it didn't really serve the purpose that they really wanted to serve. And we've had other examples also at the other end where they've actually companies have been able to use their ESOP scheme so effectively that they've had great success with that. Employees have been there, they've become multimillionaires within the organization. They've been there continuously performing for upwards of a decade as such. So we've had examples on both the extremes of the spectrum. So it's a very important to remember that it is though a very powerful tool, but at the same time it is not a end all be all. But it is good to have in the armory. And at the same time, it has to be thought through. It's very important to understand what exactly our objective is. How do we want to do it, and then go with it.
Right. So we have our first question. We are taking from Mr. Lakshmikant. They said like early stage startup work a lot with advisors or consultants or a retainer kind of a people who are not their permanent employees, right? So the law doesn't permit ESOPs to be granted to non-off-role employees and all. So most of the time, what advisors or the lawyers suggest them is like you issue a phantom stocks to those people because you cannot give equity, right? So there are two queries which are arising out of it. Like, but is there any alternative to phantom as well, which I can give to my advisors or consultant? And another is like what kind of a maximum allocation we have seen from phantom stock in the market. So I would say, and I would also ask Mr. Dheeraj as well, like on the allocation, Mr. Lakshmikant sir, there is no standard, like there is a range of 5% or 8% or 10%. Generally, which you see in ESOPs, like we create a pool of 5% or 10%. That is again not a standard or a maximum. It is on a ESOP pool, sir. It's like what percentage or dilution you can convince your upcoming investor or the existing investors, how much they are ready to dilute in form of equity. Also we need to say like by diluting 5% or 10% as a ESOP pool, what kind of a valuation we will be creating for our employees. To be very honest, I'll give you a quick example which every day I quote it. My company's valuation is 100 cr, so my 5% equity value or phantom value will be 5 cr. But the people whom I want to give it, their current compensation or CTC should have been 10 cr or vice versa. So 5% or 10% rule doesn't hold to everywhere. So we have to look at it from the lens of a, like what value we want to create for them as well, and what value addition they are giving to us as well. Now on this phantom side, generally we see a value, right? Okay, we are creating a phantom pool of say 100 cr or maybe say 10 cr, which will get allocated today and basis the every year's valuation and the revised valuation, it will get settled later on, right? So on this side, there is a, do you think like still if it exists or not, but what can be recommended as well, like other than ESOP or other than phantom, is there a third way, like we can say SAR as well, but for advisors or consultant? So what can be an option here?
Ritika, you would want to take that?
Yeah, Manish, unfortunately, right now, from a equity, perspective, the Phantom is the only one which you can give to non-employees. because what happens is you are either guided by the Companies Act or the SEBI SBAB guidelines if you are a listed company. So right now, an SAR, mind you, for listed companies, if it is equity settled, you can't give SAR to consultants as well. So this is
Right.
only applicable to unlisted companies. So unfortunately, at this time, except for SAR, there is no other instrument that you can use as an equity settled, benefit to give non-employed, non people on the payroll.
Right. On top of it, we have also see like we are committing today some value. So we should be cash rich, or we should have that cash balance available on our books or balance sheet, right? Okay, we can commit something like if to those advisors, maybe their services or the consideration of their services would be say 10 lakh a annum or maybe a 20 lakh a annum. So in lieu of that, we are committing them a phantom equity or SAR of say 40 lakh or 30 lakh.
Right.
So ideally, the equity will not be converted for a non-employee, right? Until unless we have a plan okay, after 3 years, because currently we have a cash plan, so we are not taking them on roll. But when we have a cash rich or maybe will maybe secure certain fundings, we'll make them our permanent employees or will make them on roll, right? So that I can issue equity or ESOPs at that time to them. Otherwise, we need to think like what provision I am keeping and whether it is approved by my board as well, right? So because ultimately we need to settle them in cash, right? So this is a challenge. We agree this is a challenge, but generally that is why people choose between ESOP more. In India, you say like 70-80% units are still ESOPs. And later on, like now Phantom, SAR and all becoming prevalent when people are becoming cash rich or they have surplus funds to commit up for these exceptional cases, right?
Manish, what you're saying, no, at least on the SAR front, there is still a gray area that people are kind of exploiting to the extent because the Companies Act doesn't talk about SAR. So what is happening is the minimum 1 year vesting period, which is there for ESOS, that is essentially not applicable to SAR for an unlisted company because there is no guideline anywhere to say that you need that 1 year vesting period. So what you're saying that after 1 2 years, if somebody comes on board, this is something that you can explore immediately as opposed to waiting for a one period of 1 year.
Right. Now, we have one a repetitive audience. So Himani's question is, we she needs some more insights on SAR. So I'll
Right.
maybe we have missed it or maybe we have not elaborated it in detail.
Right.
So for SAR, I'll just give a glimpse here, then we can add on. Dheeraj sir can continue on it. So Himani, SAR is a stock appreciation right, which like equal to quantum only. We give it to our say employees or certain advisors or off-roll employees, wherein we give them like I was giving you an example of appreciation. Okay, when I joined you or when it was granted to me, the price per share was 5,000 rupees, right? And I have been given an appreciation right. So whatever appreciation to this value will be, only I'll get that. So versus in ESOPs, what happens? You give me ESOPs when I exercise, it was the price was FMV was 10,000. So I'm getting a value of 10,000 into number of units I have. In SAR, you give me SAR at a rate of 5,000, and when I exercise or when the maturity happens, the price per share was 12,000. So I am eligible to get only the appreciation, which is 7,000, because this is the value addition which I have done in the organization or the organization has gained from me. Dheeraj sir, you want to add certain things
Yeah,
on?
so thanks, Manish, for that. Himaniji, what typically, so there are two ways that SARs can be settled. One is equity settled, what Manish was talking about. Second is the cash settlement, which is nothing but your typical phantom kind of equity that we have, option that we have. So, in case of equity settled, like what Manish was mentioning, it is the appreciation part. So when at the time of granting it, there is a base price which is set. Let's say, for example, today the share price is 100 rupees, and or the value fair market value is 100 rupees, depending on whether it is listed or unlisted entity. Let's say 100 rupees is the base value that has been offered to me, and then let's say 2 years down the line, it becomes 150. Right. So if 150 is the share price, so 50 rupees worth of options, that is my appreciation right. So 50 rupees worth of options will be given to me. Then that is either so I'm given like today. I'm told that at 100 rupees, 1,000 options are allocated to me, are granted to me. It becomes 150. So 50 rupees into the 1,000 options becomes my perquisite value, the value that I'm supposed to get at the end of 2 years. So that is in case it is cash settled. Then 50 rupees I pay perquisite tax on that, and then the net money comes back to me. Perquisite tax is nothing but the 50 rupees, which is taxed at the marginal tax rate that I will fall under at the end of 2 years. And at the time of exercise, in case it is equity settled, then 50 divided by the 50,000 divided by the price that time 150, that those many number of options shares will get allotted to me, right? So that's how it works. And again, the perquisite tax is applicable at that point in time. One thing to remember here is that under Companies Act, even though there is no actual exercise price that I have to pay, but under Companies Act, it is mandatory. No allotment can happen without the employee paying the face value. So I have to pay at the whatever the face value is that time. That is the exercise price that I will have to pay into the number of options, which is 1,000 options multiplied by the face value at that point in time. That is the exercise price that I will have to pay. Of course, there are ways and means to avoid that as well. If there is a trust route that can be used to to where this also can be structured within the trust itself. But that's that. So that is how SAR works. There are two options: equity settled and cash settled. Cash settled works exactly like how a phantom works. And I just explained the
Right.
SAR equity settled option.
So the other alternate, like as you mentioned, is a cashless exercise organization promote. So what they do, they launch a employee advance kind of a thing, or a one-time payment to employees to pay that amount in, like for the face value of the equity, like whether it's 10,000 or whether it is for 1,000. So they just enable the cashless exercise so that employee need not to pay anything. We have another question, and it's a very interesting thing. It's now a reverse kind of a question, right? What happened, like we have seen this as well, like the question is like, can Indian subsidiary issue ESOPs to employees of its holding company which is outside India, right, as well as in India? So what happens in law, it's specifically on ESOP, it is mentioned like, I can give ESOPs to a subsidiary company of mine or an employee of my subsidiary company. In act specifically, it is not written, okay, I can give ESOPs to my parent entity, like in case holding. That too, the act is saying like the 100% subsidiary it should be like, or in India, outside India, it doesn't restrict or mention specifically. So now question is reverse. Can a subsidiary company issue ESOPs to its holding company who is registered outside India? So law doesn't even say yes to it or say no to it, but ultimately it is not possible. It doesn't done, right? So Ritika, you have to answer on it.
Yeah, Manish. So effectively, you can, if you read the law a little bit more, you can issue ESOP to your holding company, also employees of your holding company outside of India, but you have to be careful of the FDI guidelines. So
Right.
because every sector has a limit, so you have to make sure that if you have a lot of foreign employees, you are not crossing that FDI limit, which is allowed for your sector. So that is something that you need to be careful of. But you can issue ESOPs to an employee of your holding company outside of India.
And
So,
that 100,
and
sorry.
just to add to what Ritik has mentioned, see, it needs to be read in conjunction with the Section 26, Section 26 of the Companies Act, which defines the associate company. So you need to look at that, which even SEBI's for listed entities, SEBI's SBEPSC guidelines also refer to that as associate company. So there, so you need to read it in conjunction with the Companies Act, Section 26.
And on this reverse grant, is there any special or a separate tax implication as well on the employee or the company? Generally, on the employee side, tax implication arises in India only at the perquisite or exercise time. But if we are granting ESOPs to a holding company who's are outside Indian employee, so maybe on a country to country, it may differ.
Yes, you're right. So it will be the jurisdiction of that particular country and what the tax norms there are should apply.
Sure. So thank you everyone for being so patient and being so attentive during the entire session. We tried to cover the maximum information which we can share, which we can make people aware of it, and can have a two-way or three-way kind of a discussion on certain areas. And these areas and the topics or the bullet points on which we had a discussion during the last 1 hour, we have picked it from the market surveys, like what are the most discussed and most asked topics in the market or the industry, what are the most searched keywords in the domains, right?
Okay,
These are certain areas.
Manish, we have a couple more questions. I think we can take those and then call it, right.
Sure.
So Mr. Bandyopadhyay has asked what happens to the unequitized ESOP pool when a company gets acquired. Does the total share pool decrease as those unexercised ESOP lapses, or the unexercised ESOP gets added to the owner of investors? This will increase the stake. So it is again, the guidelines for whether SEBI or the ESOP guidelines are fairly clear in what happens in what case. So, and also a lot is left to the companies to decide what happens in when it gets acquired. uh, Typically, if we were to look at it, if it is the options are whether unexercised or it is unvested. So each of the treatments are very different. Unvested options or vested options, how does it treat? It's very, it's again case to case basis. But vested options, typically what happens is things that when the company gets acquired or merged, the merged entity, whatever is the ratio that comes in, how's the ESOP pool? Is there an ESOP there as well? Is there an ESOP here as well? How does that migrate? All that is decided based on what the swap ratios are and how the equity is going to hold. So typically, yes, if they are unexercised but vested, they will continue to get carried forward or converted into equity of the acquiring company. Again, the point here is that the employee should not be shortchanged in any manner for that matter. Right? It cannot be detrimental to the whatever the action happens. It cannot be detrimental to the employee's interest who's been granted ESOPs.
Thank
Okay.
you.
So, can we issue SAR or Phantom to advisors outside India? Yes, we can.
And thank you. I think there, in case there are any more questions, we'll be answering all of them one-to-one basis. Like we ensure all our audience, like if we have even a repetitive query as well, you'll get answer and responses for all the queries submitted during the webinar. Considering and respecting everyone's time limit and the time zone, we have to say a goodbye and to everyone. Once again, thanks for joining, and we hope like there is something which we are taking from this webinar, maybe in terms of knowledge, maybe in terms of certain clarities or clarifications, which we will be implementing or maybe we will be using whenever we face situations like this, or whenever we are thinking to implement a new option scheme in our organization, right? So once again, I would like to thank you, Mr. Dheeraj sir and Ritika, for joining in and bringing a pool of knowledge and your experience in this domain. And we believe all our audiences has also gained a lot of new insights. And maybe if the knowledge is repetitive, but it's from a different experience, it is always an add-on to us. Maybe we keep on reading on Google, maybe we keep on reading on multiple articles or blogs, but whenever we listen it from a point of view of certain practical experiences from the industry, it always increases our knowledge share as well as
Yeah.
our different insights on a different
Right.
situations as well.
Thank you so much,
Yes.
Manish. Thank you so much, Sania, for having us over. And thank you so much for all the audience and the questions that they had. It was nice being here. And I'm sure we look forward to participating in more such webinars where we actually go dive deep into each of those options and discuss them in more in detail. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you so
Thank
much,
you.
Dheeraj and
Thank
Ritika.
you once again.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Dropping off. Have a great day.
Yeah, you too. Thanks.